and Judge Andrea Martin Lane.
That's
Andrea
me.
Martin Lane. I have to make sure I put the Lane part in there. If you ever see her husband, you better put the Lane part in there. So, and I'm standing up here. I hope that I'm in the frame because they came in just taking over the studio, having a great time.
Yes.
And it's great to see both of you. How you been doing?
Wonderful. No complaints.
Yeah, just great.
Just great. What's going on in the courts?
You know, same old, same old. We are ending the year trying to make sure that we continue making families. In fact, the statistics came out for adoptions in Texas. We're doing wonderful things because of policies that we put in place. It shows that more kids are leaving foster care and going to adoptions with relatives. So that means less broken children because they're in a system that's been broken for a long time, and especially when it comes to children who look like us. So, you know, we put some things in place.
So was that one of the incentives or one of the things you put in place where you try to keep families together?
Absolutely.
That's good. You know, and I remember you saying that, and with that, in that same vein that you were speaking on, I start telling people, hey, look, if you know, even in your family, just like you have insurance. Say, for instance, if CPS gets it wrong, who would your children go to? Trying to get that worked out ahead of time.
Right.
That's
yes.
good to work. But that was in the same vein in what y'all were doing in the court.
Mm-hmm.
But I was trying to remind people that they need to have, like, hey, look, get sister qualified or get brother qualified. Somebody has to get qualified, meet that criteria. And then could you tell us what are some of the criteria that hang up a lot of people?
And I'm glad you said that because people have to ask those difficult questions because you assume that because you've known them all your life, you go and hang out from time to time, that you know what's in their background, you know what's going on in their house. You have to ask questions like, are you a drug user? If you are a drug user, what types of drugs do you use and how often? Who comes to your house? Do they use drugs?
So have one of those real serious
conversations.
But then you know, CPS catches you up because they'll ask you, have you ever used drugs? Have you ever smoked marijuana? And the person will say yes, and it may be when they were 15 and they're now 50. So they use it against them.
So what should they say to that?
You definitely want to be honest with your background, but when it comes to trying to find people who could possibly take your children, in the event that they're taken from you, you want to know what type of lifestyle they live, who comes to their house, and the people who come to their house if they have criminal records, because CPS won't place if there's certain criminal records, and then also the income. Do you have sufficient income to take my child if I'm not able to help you? Do you have the space? You have to ask these difficult questions and find someone that you can put in place in the event something happens.
We're talking about what happens to your children, and we're talking about putting safeguards in place because you never know when you may become a subject or a target of CPS. Your child goes to school with a bruise on, or if your child, for whatever, seeks out trying to get attention, or whatever may be in your family, who will get custody of that child? You wouldn't want them to go to foster care, so CPS can place them with a relative, a grandmother, or so and so. So we're talking about how to vet that person. It's almost like looking to see if I would pass away, who would receive my children.
Yes.
But it's a little bit different because you're talking about CPS. They're going to scrutinize it and vet that person, investigate that person.
Right.
Some people don't want to go into that scrutiny.
They don't, and then you got to make sure that that person can meet the child's needs and protect the child. So you really need to know who you're dealing with before you ask for the children to be placed.
And when you talk about that scrutiny, that's a big thing when it comes to our community because we have been taught not to trust the man, not to trust the people, not to trust the government. And a lot of times when people come to our court who want to get their relatives out of foster care, CPS will come in and say, well, they were evasive. They didn't give us truthful answers. And I have to tell them, you are the people. They don't trust you. They're not going to invite you into we're not going to invite you into our lives because when we do, then that leads to other actions. So because we are from the community, we understand that. And even if CPS doesn't place, then we can go ahead and place.
So with that, now CPS, they don't have any authority of themselves to enter into a home, do they?
They do.
I mean, well, I'm saying without the courts.
If it's an emergency situation, they can go and investigate. And they can even call the police, and the police can sometimes ask you to open your door, but I tell people don't ever open your doors without the court order. Don't try to talk your way out of something. Don't invite them in to investigate. Wait for a court order.
Wait for a court order. In other words, wait for movement from the court.
Yes.
In a sense, not just out of fear.
Yes.
Because sometimes you are giving evidence that can be
all the time
presented in court
all the time
and on the record.
Yes.
And it makes it hard when you appear before Judge Lane or Judge Cooks to make sense out of it. In other words, all you can look at is the evidence.
Right.
That the person, in other words, yeah, I smoke weed, or yeah, I do drugs. Leave it
Right,
open
and
ended.
then you're right. You have to be specific. So if they ask you that question, you need to say, "It was when I was 19. I'm now 35." I mean,
I like that.
Right.
So basically, give a timeline. In other words,
exactly.
I want to be clear for the record. I did smoke drugs. I mean, do drugs when I was young.
Right.
Right.
That was some 20 years ago.
Yes.
Given some time and space.
Yes.
Now, with that, when you give a statement, do you get a copy of that statement that CPS is going to use, or?
Not usually. And during the investigation stage, when you were asking if they have the authority to come into your house, if you let them in, they're going to come in and they all have laptops that have recorders on them. And they will record interviews with you, they'll record interviews with the children, and they also take notes. So those are records that I don't think attorneys really know those are available. No one ever asked me for a subpoena of them, but I've seen them. The interview of children, interview of the parents, and the written transcript of what happened.
But then what's in the petition that comes to actual court is not verbatim. It's a narrative
Yes.
of what they interpret that you said.
Right.
So with that, now, if say for instance CPS come to my house, for example, and they pull out their tape recorder, do I have the right to pull out my tape recorder?
I always have a recorder. If you are in a part of a
You record me
conversation,
right now.
not right now.
You know what? She might be.
I'm not recording,
Might be.
but I will record because that's for our protection. Over the years, we've learned that when someone invites us to come and have a conversation, that we need to have a separate set of ears that are going to record everything that was said for our protection.
Now, Judge, now people now they're going to be looking out for you now. So
That's
anyway,
okay.
so-
I'll show them if I'm recording. I don't have any reason to hide it.
But basically, you just want to make sure to memorialize
Yes.
what was said,
Yes.
so it's not he said, she said, or she said,
Absolutely.
she said.
Absolutely.
I get that, and I think that is true when you're dealing with certain people.
Yes.
Certain people make you have to record
Yes.
them
Yes.
in a way, and I think when you come to court talking with your children, someone coming in your house, and they're going to take a narrative of a record, like Judge Cook was saying, and they're not going to give all the meat of it.
No.
They're going to just make their narrative. I'll take this out.
Right.
And
Yep,
this
right,
in.
yep, right,
And-
yes.
But when I say, or if I have an attorney that's skilled enough, say I would like to enter into the evidence, Your Honor, the whole what was said, and then I guess they have to prove it up that it is in the original form, or so on and so forth, to get it as a part of the record.
Yes.
So, I would advise that for most people, because you talk about CPS, you talk about taking your children, because once the children leave the home, it's hard to get them back.
It's so very hard. But, when you talked about that scrutiny that happens if someone makes an outcry, that may not be true. As you said, sometimes kids, especially teenagers, they don't realize the consequences of their actions, and they might say something that's not true.
Right.
It's important that you protect yourself. First, make sure there's people that you can take your child to, but also know that this is an adversarial process. You have the government up here and you're down here trying to prove that you are a good parent. So go into that knowing that you're not going to make friends. This is a CPS caseworker. She's not going to be your friend. Everything you say is going to be recorded and used against you.
And what we're talking about, and Judge Cooks and Judge Lane, they're not giving parents how to beat the system, but what they're doing is letting you know your rights. Court is about your rights.
Yes,
it's not about
exactly.
this side or that side. It's about what is constitutional correct. And what they're saying and what they're sharing with us today is that know your rights as a parent, because not all cases where CPS take children, they should have, maybe the children shouldn't have been taken under that criteria, but because of the information that was put forward, because it was misunderstood, just like in a conversation, you say something to someone, just in talking, you find out some people, they see it one way and you see it a whole different way. And so you just have a bad understanding. And the Bible says, and all you're getting, get an understanding. So the best way to get an understanding is memorialize it in a record. So we've been talking about CPS. Is that one of the hot topics in the court?
Definitely one of the hot topics, but we have some good news. That sounds bad, but we have some good news
Some
too.
good news.
Because other practices that we put in place, and the statistics came out Wednesday to show that it's working. In 2018 and 2019, we've had record less number of kids being taken into foster care, because now they understand our policies. we're not going to remove children for certain things. There's things you can do within the home to keep the family intact.
Keep the family
And
intact.
so because of that, and the policies we put in place, now they're understanding it, and the district attorneys who are in our court are telling their clients, CPS, the judge's policy is this, this, and this. Don't file this. We're not removing this. Think of some other options. And I think we've done a great thing. We're keeping families together.
It is. And you know, it's
Families
important. We're
together.
trying to make sure that they move more towards how can we help them, the children stay at home, because it's traumatic when children have to be
Yeah.
snatched up from their home. How can they stay at home with their family and their services provided? Because ultimately, if we're truly trying to help the family and truly trying to help the parents or rehabilitate them, they can do the services at home. They can go to drug treatment at home. They can go to counseling at home. They can have a therapist come to the home.
So as long as you're saying, as long as they're participating in the rehabilitation
Yes.
Right.
of the family, then as judges, you're saying, okay, we're going to look at that. There's no longer, okay, you are out of bounds here, so I'm going to take your children. No.
Right.
You can do this on an outpatient basis, or you can go through therapy,
Yes.
or you can go to family therapy to work it out and keep the family together. Because I think once, and this is what people fail to realize, once children are taken out of the home, and it may seem like that's one time that happened when that person was young, but that stays with them as they become adults. That's the part becomes a part of family history, and it becomes very horrific in that family. When that happens, where the child may want to come back, can't get back. Now the child is growing up, where that family relationship has been severed. So I really commend you as far as taking the stance on trying to keep families together, because it's not, I know it's not popular, because there are some people, they need their children taken away
That's
from
true.
them. There's some people
That
like
is true.
you should be like never be able to help children. I definitely understand that, but I like the fact that you're able to separate the wheat from the corn.
Yes.
And so you're able to see what works and what needs to be retooled. And that takes thinking out of the box.
And like I said, the stats show it. Greg Abbott just released the stats for what's going on with CPS. And I'm just glad that we have done our part for Texas's children.
Very good, very good. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back with you right after this break. That was good.
Thank you. We never know what we're going to talk about.